Hello.
Hi, Anshul, how are you?
All good, sir. Am I audible?
Yeah, perfectly.
Good, good, good. I'm joining
सैटरडे को सूट वूट डाल के बैठे हो यार।
Saturday, sir.
हाँ वही तो कह रहा हूँ, सैटरडे सूट।
हाँ सर, वेबिनार है। वेबिनार में देखो प्रोफेशनल्स के बीच में आते हैं तो वो प्रोफेशनल की तरह ही आना चाहिए, मेरे को ऐसा लगता है।
गुड गुड, that's
मैं
fine.
पहली बार मैं जोहो मीटिंग्स में पहली बार कर रहा हूँ। आई हैव नेवर यूज्ड दिस टूल बिफोर।
अच्छा, ओके। ये हम तो नॉर्मली वी डू इट ऑन Zoho, but probably sooner or later we'll be shifting to YouTube live.
मे बी जहाँ से स्ट्रीमिंग हो सके वो बेसिक।
Yeah. So Mukesh, are you there? I think Mukesh is not there. So, let me just find out. He's calling, just a second. Anshul, just a second. For the benefit of the users, I would like to introduce you because Mukesh is not able to log in.
Okay.
So for the benefit of the viewers who are joining in, we have here Anshul. You know, he's he's a professional like me in the field of chartered accountancy and has been around for a lot of years now, close to about 13, 14 years, and good exposure from Big Four, now running his own successful consultancy from Gurgaon and part of it in Delhi. And he has a lot of experience, rather hardcore experience in tax and its, tentacles around it, including transfer pricing. So I requested him to be, a speaker on the new arena that we are all seeing and reading around called carbon tax. To start with carbon tax, I'm not saying carbon tax as in a literal sense. What we are going to discuss is the larger impact of carbon tax in terms of direct tax and in terms of the indirect levies that are happening across the world. Probably sooner or later in India as well. In fact, yesterday, not in this subject, but on the subject of capital gain, I posted a point on unrealized tax, a new thing for me to be taxed by running US President Kamala Harris. She's proposing something called unrealized tax, which is something new for me. And, I thought probably, something we can discuss maybe in the next this thing. So over to Anshul. Let's start.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Just a little update that 13, 14 years of experience has now gone up to 20 years of experience almost around.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yeah.
13 years was when I left Deloitte in 2019. So
चलो
just
कोई बात नहीं, फिर भी फिर भी काले हैं,
on a lighter front. We are going to discuss the environment, the social responsibilities, governance, and so many other things now.
Yeah.
That is the need of the hour. As you rightly mentioned, that this is something which is an upcoming arena for India in particular, because in the carbon emissions and the responsibility to bring down the emissions has been the talk of the town for past many decades. There has been a lot of efforts from the so-called developed countries, because they were in the forefront of doing these carbon emissions because of their industrial revolutions and so many other things, because of the fast-paced development they had seen in the last century. But the global south, as we call the third world countries and the developing countries, which are yet to witness that kind of sustainability and development in their own economies and their own worlds, they found themselves at the receiving end, because they have not witnessed that kind of development, but still they were required to bring down the emissions. So which would mean that they were being deprived of the opportunities of that development, which
Yeah.
the developed countries have already been, they have already had that benefit. So there has been some resistance from developing countries and the third world countries about their obligations, and they have been obviously pushing forward the agenda that the developed countries should be at the forefront of carbon reductions as well. And that's where the Kyoto Protocol and all those protocols in the past have come into picture, wherein the mechanisms of carbon credits were also identified as a mechanism to bring down the carbon emissions, and which was basically a mechanism of offset.
Yeah.
Somebody would make more emissions and somebody would reduce the emissions, and the person who is reducing the emission should be benefited. And benefited by whom? By the person who is emitting more carbon, right, into the environment. So that is basically a kind of offset mechanism wherein there were some regulatory bodies which were established to regulate the levels of emission which are acceptable for the environment, which we call cap and trade. Cap and trade means that there is a capping for different kind of industries, that what kind of emission should be considered as a upper limit, that beyond this, if you are emitting carbon emissions, then you should be liable to bear some cost around it. Now, how to bear that cost? That somebody who is emitting lesser carbons from that limit, then they are earning some credits, and you go and buy those credits from the other party. So
Yeah.
basically, the party who is reducing the carbon emissions is benefited by way of selling these carbon credits. So now these are the primitive forms of encouraging, I would say that these are the incentives given to companies or the entities, business entrepreneurs, to reduce on the carbon emissions. Now there are certain other aspects, that this is one form of incentives. Then there will be some other forms of uh, you know uh, so carrot and stick kind of an approach. So this is carrot. The stick will be the kind of taxes which are imposed directly on carbon emissions. So from some countries in Europe, some countries in Americas, US, Canada, Sweden, UK, they have introduced certain kinds of taxes on the emission itself. Now they are saying that if you emit carbons beyond this particular limit or capping, whatever the standards are set, then some taxes will be levied. Now taxes can be varying from different jurisdictions to different jurisdiction. And as of now, India does not have too much of carbon tax in place, because I think there is only some carbon coal cess which is applicable on the carbon emissions, but it's very restricted to coal usage. In a wider spectrum of industry regulations, there is not a deep dive into carbon taxation rules or regulations in India. However, there has been an incentive kind of scheme and incentivization to use the renewable energy, wherein the renewable energy certificates were scheme were formulated, and it is a similar kind of an Indian brother of carbon credit scheme, basically carbon credit offsets, and that has been in place and that has been going on. And very recently, last year, national committee has been set up for building up a carbon credit scheme in India, carbon credit trading scheme.
Yeah.
So it is known as Carbon Credit Scheme 2023. There is a Bureau of Energy which has been set up. There is a national committee which has been set up. They are formalizing the rules, and probably they are expecting, targeting that by 2025 to 2026, this carbon credit trading mechanism should be in place. Basically, this will be similarly, there will be a trading platform,
Yeah.
right, which will be established, electronic trading platform on which people who have these carbon credits can put forth for selling, and people who are obligated, because obligation means that they are emitting more carbons, they will be obligated to purchase the carbon credits, right? So now there will be taxation issues around this. So
Yeah.
as of now, Indian income tax law is not fully equipped, so as to say, to tackle these kind of issues.
नहीं वो तो देखो जो जो इनकम टैक्स वाला एंगल है, एज आई सेड, यू नो, इट इज two sides of the same coin. One is the direct levy, which is of course the income tax in terms of capital gain, buying and selling and all that, right? The second aspect is the indirect way of levying tax. You know, somewhere you're selling goods in a territory where strict regulations are there. You are not from a territory where strict regulations are there, so some markup is being taxed, right? So those are the two aspects. So you very rightly said that in India we already have that for I think a lot of years now in terms of the carbon credit, but till now probably nobody knew what carbon credit was all about, right? Hardly a few, rather one or two balance sheet probably will be having carbon credits or carbon deficits sitting in their books, right? Yeah.
So carbon deficit and carbon, I don't know how these are recognized, because as of now, I've not seen them to be recognized in the books of accounts. Probably from a carbon tax perspective, some obligations.
Are you there, Anshul? Anshul? Guys, are you able to hear him?
Incentive schemes rather than towards the taxation. So, in fact, because there is a carbon credit scheme and people in India have been earning money by selling these carbon credits. Indian income tax law brought 115 BBG is that whatever income you earn from selling these carbon credits, but
Actually, you have
I
think there is a bandwidth issue at your end. Let me switch off.
rejoin. Let me rejoin. Is it better now?
Let me put my video off. I think that would be a little better. Let's see.
Better now?
Yeah. No, we are losing you again and again.
Okay, allow me to rejoin. Allow me to rejoin. Just rejoin.
Yeah. Because even others are also saying that you are. Is okay. Anshul, I think you can switch off your.
Am I audible now?
Yeah, you are audible now.
Is it better?
Yeah, much better. I think video off would be a little better while you're talking. But you can intermittently keep it on and off, kind of a thing.
Sure. So I was saying that in India, there was a new introduction. There was an introduction of a new section, which was 115 BBG, which sought to tax the income generated from sale of carbon credits, right? So carbon credits and those carbon credits which are generated under the Kyoto Protocol only. So it doesn't talk about taxation of renewable energy
No, Anshul, we are losing.
certificates, or it doesn't talk about carbon credits generated under any other scheme in the world.
Can you repeat, because we lost you for that when you were saying that they are not for REC, I think.
Yes. So basically, what is the carbon? This new section talks about only taxation of income generated from sale of carbon credits under Kyoto Protocol. Was that audible?
Yeah, intermittently your voice is cracking and going away, I guess. Some issues there. We
Not
lost
sure
you.
what is happening because I'm on Wi-Fi, office Wi-Fi.
You lost you. Maybe you can connect with your phone. I think that would be better. Try and see.
Allow me. Just give me a moment.
Yeah. Sorry, guys. I guess some technical issue at Anshul's end. Just hang on. He's just reconnecting back onto.
Hello.
Yes, Anshul.
We better है sir?
Much better. Yeah.
मैं कह रहा था कि जो हमारा कार्बन क्रेडिट का सेक्शन आया था 115 BPG, that section talks about only taxation on the sale of carbon credits received under the Kyoto Protocol.
Okay.
Right. So that doesn't talk about any other carbon credits, and that's why the renewable energy certificates, the income generated from sale of renewable energy certificates, that is still not taxable in India. And there has been a judgment from Amritsar Tribunal also in the case of Setia Industries, which says that this sale from receipts from the sale of renewable energy certificates is not taxable, and it has categorically held that this is a capital receipt which is not chargeable to tax in absence of any taxing provisions. And they have also considered one of the points that it is also not chargeable to tax under the MAT provisions, minimum alternate tax.
Okay. And does this position remain similar with the voluntary carbon credits as well, which are issued by other registries?
Absolutely, because the section is very, very categoric in the words or in the carbon credits which they seek to tax. That is carbon credits generated under, I think, Montreal Protocol or something, which it is written. So there is only just one protocol which is covered as on date.
Got it. So that way, then I think probably the Indian businesses are in a better position to cover up their tracks, probably from the credits that are available in other areas.
Right. They are, and it says that carbon credit under which is validated by the United Nations framework on climate change. So that is what is covered as of now.
Got
right.
it. So
now the one other thing which I want to mention, that this is a new section which prescribes the tax rate. right? But if we were to go into some nitty-gritty of the taxation, that how the chargeability to tax comes in. The chargeability to tax comes in from section 2, wherein the income is defined,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
In the definition of income, this receipt from carbon tax has not yet been included.
Okay.
So
So
if we were to say that you have prescribed the tax rate, but you have not created a chargeability in the first place. So first of all, the first step to bring any income or any receipt into taxation net is to create a chargeability on that income. So because they have not yet uh, included it in the definition of income, there is a possibility to claim still claim even after the prescribed tax rate that this income is not taxable. However, wherever there are voluntary carbon credit schemes which are not as per the United Nations framework,
no,
and
they
they
are as per the framework only, but they are called the voluntary side because
Hmm.
why they are called the voluntary side is because they are not part of a forced legislation on that particular industry. That is why they are called voluntary.
It says section mention that which is
Your voice is lost.
which is hello.
Yeah.
The section says that which is validated by the United Nations framework. Is validated by the United Nations framework. So I'm not very sure that
Okay.
whether the voluntary schemes would be validated by the
So they see all those schemes are part of the protocol that has been signed by various countries. So and those registries are very well uh, established and authenticate to certify a particular project for credits. So that's part of the rule book.
so see that's what I'm saying, that there is certain gray area. The book is still open now because we have not seen too much of litigation around this particular aspect as of now.
Hmm, hmm.
And what we have seen in the recent past is that the international carbon credit market has also reduced to a little. Means it's not as hot as it used to be a few years back,
Hmm, hmm.
right? So
That could be, see, that could be the point on the loosening up of the probability enforcement for those last 2 3 4 years. I would say probably because of COVID, a little lackadaisical approach around it. But now it's picking up. Now, though, things are hotting up. In fact, in India, you've seen when very rightly said that the rules have brought in, Energy Conservation Act is now ratified, is rather modified to even accommodate more details around it. So the direct levy part is already taken care of. Of course, the penalty part of it for not complying in the relevant legislation is still pending. You know, so probably that too might walk in, and that indirect part may sometime come into the picture, something like a GST or probably a surcharge.
correct. So as I mentioned in the beginning, that there has to be a carrot and stick approach. And India, what we have seen in the past, they have always gone towards the incentivization approach rather than putting some levies around it. So, but what I can gauge is that the government is not willing to lose upon the revenue which can be generated through income taxes on the sale of carbon credits.
Hmm.
Right, because if the government has brought in this section of 115 BBG, which seeks to tax the sale of carbon credits under United Nations framework, then most likely they will bring in the section or bring in some changes to this present section to cover up the trading of carbon credits in the domestic market also under the domestic scheme, so as to
Hmm.
make it amply clear.
Hmm.
Now, what probably should be done or maybe done is to defer this for a few years, because ultimately in the initial years there will be some requirement of incentivizing, some more incentives may be used. It needs to settle down, it's need to percolate to larger industry, larger players, and even to lot of remote areas, so that people are more aware about the about these kind of impact about these kind of changes which are being brought in to control the environment conditions, and they are also technology ready, to implement those kind of things, because these kind of technologies are also expensive in their own right.
Yeah.
So if you say that no, we are incentivizing you at one hand but taking out some portion of it through taxes, so to my mind, in initial years, government may be willing to give away that revenue source.
नहीं, देखो implementation तो is part of the process. So as of now, wherever we are going and discussing things about ESG to people, so that cost part is weighing very heavy on most of the companies. Large corporates can always handle it depending upon their size and all, but of course the smaller ones are a little more impacted because of the supply chain issues, right? So that will be there probably as we grow another 2 years, 3 years. वो एक सेटल डाउन हो जाएगा, टेक्नोलॉजी भी एक सेटल डाउन हो जाएगी, तो कॉस्ट बेनिफिट एनालिसिस बनना शुरू हो जाएगा. But coming back to the point on tax, so then with this ESG now brought in, carbon tax as a whole has emerged as a new area of mitigation, if I may so use the word, right? So large corporate like mining, iron and steel, your transport, all these people will now, as per the sustainability standards, have to mitigate that element. अभी ठीक है, quantify नहीं हुआ है इंडिया में, but if we take a what do you call it, a copy from the NGT penalties that are being levied, or the plastic waste or the biodegradable waste, something like that probably will be emerging here as well, right? So those also are the kind of taxes which probably these companies will have to be taking care of.
Absolutely, there is no backing from that aspect, क्योंकि ये सब चीजों को तो आज की डेट में आपको अकाउंट फॉर करना ही पड़ेगा. See, from past also there has been some taxes on the diesel cars, there has been some taxes on the use of these kind of fuels. Then there has been a lot of push from the government and the auto ministry to move towards EVs, right? There were incentives to go for the EVs, but ultimately EVs will not solve the problem until and unless the electricity generation is from the renewable energy sources. आप EV में तो use कर रहे हो, but electricity फिर भी वही coal के production से ही आ रहा है, उससे कोई बहुत ज़्यादा होगा नहीं, and the government recognizes that. And therefore, if you would see that the guidelines over use of ethanol in diesel and petrol, they are, evolving. Not, and there is a mandate on sugar companies also that they should produce ethanol, or there is incentives to them that you produce ethanol, we will purchase all of that, and we'll put some guidelines that certain percentage of ethanol can be used within these fuels. So ultimately, what happens is that, again, I'm saying that there has been some certain incentives and there has been certain costs also, because otherwise के ये जो भी mixing वगैरह होगी, उसमें कुछ ना कुछ costs आएंगी, उसमें कुछ ना कुछ processes लगेंगी, additional आपको processes built in करनी पड़ेंगी, so that they will have some cost, and obviously government will also earn certain revenues by levying certain taxes, because as on date also the major cost within the petrol and the diesel is the taxes. They, I would say that वो भी एक कार्बन टैक्स ही है मोटा मोटा, मतलब आप उस नाम से कार्बन टैक्स नहीं बोलते, बट जो लेवीज हैं, द हाई सेंट्रल लेवीज, और उसमें आज की डेट पे गवर्नमेंट, स्टेट गवर्नमेंट का लेवी भी है, सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट का लेवी भी है. The part of that levy is kind of a carbon tax only, because then ultimately that is harming the environment, right? So वो चीज तो चल ही रही है, और ये सब चीजें going forward, to my mind there will be much more pressure on these kind of traditional technologies or traditional fossil fuels. इसमें आगे जाके बर्डन बना ही रहेगा और ये बर्डन बढ़ता ही जाएगा.
तो अभी तक have you seen focus of these large or probably the supply chain looking at the tax side as well? or are they just right now probably just looking at the report and done with and finished?
तो सर अभी तो वो ये होता है ना, ग्रेजुअल अपब्रिंगिंग ही होगी, ग्रेजुअली ही होगा अभी, because these standards are very new, because they is applying only to large corporates. अभी तो mandate जितना था last year में वो top 1000 companies by market capitalization उन्हीं के ऊपर अप्लाई कर रहा है BSE में. तो एज ऑन डेट अभी होता क्या है ना, अगर आप याद करेंगे जीएसटी वाला टाइम, आई एम जस्ट टेकिंग एन एग्जांपल. जीएसटी फर्स्ट प्रपोज हुआ था 2009-10 के आसपास में, अल्टीमेटली जाके इम्प्लीमेंट हुआ 2017 में. 2017 में जब आ रहा था और फरवरी मार्च में जब हम लोग बैठे हुए थे, तब भी मेजॉरिटी ऑफ कंपनीज वर एक्सपेक्टिंग कि इस बार भी डेफर हो जाएगा. ठीक है ना, तो कोई प्रिपरेशन ग्राउंड लेवल पे बहुत ज्यादा थी नहीं. वो तो उस टाइम पे जब गवर्नमेंट ने बोल दिया कि नहीं भाई अब तो करना ही है, अब तो करना ही है, अब करेंगे तब, और उस टाइम पे ही फिर जाकर के वो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन शुरू हुआ. सो नाउ सिमिलर इज द केस विद द ESG इम्प्लीमेंटेशन थिंग्स आल्सो. अभी तो लोग बस, जितना हमने देखा है कि वो अभी तो सिर्फ ये है कि हमें जो रिपोर्टिंग करनी है वो रिपोर्टिंग हो जाए. Obviously there are large multinational companies who are very considerate about these kind of challenges, and they are voluntarily putting up a lot of efforts around this. But the majority of the universe, I'm talking about the broader industry within India, the majority of the universe of these industry or the entities, they are not looking towards even implementation. Forget means the taxation will come at a later point of time. So there is lot more awareness required to implement and to, emphasize upon the point that why these kind of goals are very important and necessary for the coming years. Because I was reading somewhere that even 1.5 degree of rise in the normal temperature of the earth can lead to such severe circumstances, which can be very dangerous. So to control even 0.1 degree, 0.2 degrees of temperature on a global basis is very important. So obviously there has to be effort, a concentrated effort. Now it can be through push, it can be through awareness, it can be through putting more taxes around these kind of traditional fossil fuels usage, or the processes which are, emitting more carbons into the environment. All these kind of concentrated effort will be required.
While you're raising this point, it just goes to my thought on the transfer pricing side. Does it have an impact there as well? Because there is a cost involved, or probably there is a credit involved, whatever.
So transfer pricing
also play a role in that?
Transfer pricing will come into picture only when there is intercompany transactions. So for example, if I have a carbon credit in India, and my parent company or my associated enterprise is sitting outside of India, and they are buying. Yeah, so that is the transfer pricing basically. If there is any kind of transaction, now if there is a technology sitting out in my parent company which gives me the benefit of reducing the carbon emissions in India, and I am purchasing that technology, or I'm giving some royalty for use of that technology, even in those circumstances the transfer pricing will come into picture. But what will happen is that the benchmarking will be difficult, because ultimately you can't benchmark some proprietary kind of technologies which are very new to the business world. So there can be challenges around those transfer pricing issues as well. However, as on date, the mechanism to do transfer pricing is restricted within those 5 broad methods, the transactional net margin method being used the most of the times. And if the companies are making profits, probably we will see that everything will settle into those principles themselves.
Look, a corollary to this is there is a multilateral carbon tax treaty that has been floated, right? And whatever brief I could understand and read about it is on the similar lines of a TTAA. What we were just discussing a step back, that if there is a transaction, basically if there is a credit lying in a subsidiary of a company in India, and the parent is probably having more emissions, and they buy it out and or probably trade it together, there will be an offset mechanism that would be available. So any thoughts on that side?
So probably we'll have to see that what is the final outcome in that multilateral treaty, because see, if somebody has to purchase and pay for that, then probably the treaty will not be material enough, because that is happening right now also. If I am within a group, my associated enterprise in some other part of the world is having offset, having credits, and I'm obligated to purchase those credits, because I'm emitting more carbon. Then my first preference will be to go within my group and purchase those credits within the group itself, and that would be happening right now also. The ultimate goal of the treaty might be that there is no requirement to buy and sell these items. There is some mechanism to kind of settle it off within that treaty framework.
Okay, something like an intercompany transaction.
May not be required. That's what they are probably means. I'm not very sure that how this is going to be finally implemented. But ultimately, the multilateral treaty should be giving an opportunity that without conducting that transaction, they will recognize that the other part of the entity which is present in the other jurisdiction has already offset the requirements which were obligations of the entity present in country A, right? So we will need to see whether means even in that aspect how transfer pricing will play into that, because ultimately they will say that this is a deemed international transaction,
right?
That you should have otherwise received some money, but you are not receiving any money. So that can also be an aspect which needs to be probably considered within the transfer pricing regulations as and when this is implemented, and proper guidelines would be required to be issued around these. और in a normal circumstance, say for example, अगर हम वही बात करते हैं कि भाई ट्रांजैक्शन हो रही है, मतलब मल्टीलैटरल ट्रीटी तो आ गई, बट उसने एक मैकेनिज्म प्रोवाइड कर दिया कि आप विद इन ग्रुप करोगे तो कैसे करोगे, विद इन कंट्रीज करोगे तो क्या करोगे, या एक दो कंट्री आपस में जब करेंगे तो वो लोकल कार्बन क्रेडिट्स को प्रोबेबली अलाउ कर देंगे कि भाई जैसे इंडिया में नेशनल कमीशन बन गया तो वी विल अलाउ कि हाँ उन्होंने जो वेरीफाई कर लिया, वी विल एक्सेप्ट दैट टू बी परचेज्ड एंड सोल्ड विद इन आवर कंट्री आल्सो, right? So all those mechanisms probably might be there, and we'll have to see that how this is actually implemented to come to a conclusion that what will be the tax implications around that.
But coming, that now that it has been started from 23 onwards on large corporates and the supply chain, so slowly and slowly, probably another 25 end or probably 26 mid, enough of data would be available to understand where the leakages are or where the positives are. Do you think this could be another arena for the government to have a lot of tax collection coming in?
Probably, I would feel that yes, taxation is an important aspect. However, tax will come a little later probably, because at this point of time, the emphasis is on reporting, and prior to reporting, to set those benchmarks wherein the reporting can be done. Around those benchmarks only the reporting will be done.
Correct.
It would be, but obviously means the companies and the entities which are implementing these kind of goals and standards, they'll have to be considerate about the fact that at some point of time there might be some tax implications around these implementations, whenever they are implementing new technologies, or whether they are selling the credits or they are buying the credits, whether these credits purchases will be available as tax set off, as tax deductions, or if they are buying these obligations or buying these credits for certain plant and machinery which they have purchased, whether that will go into the cost of the plant.
Yeah.
So all those aspects will be required to be seen, right? Say for example.
Yeah, Continue.
So, for example, if they are implementing these goals, the ESG standards, and for achieving the achieving the desired level of carbon emissions, to reduce their carbon emissions, they put in new technologies, they put in new plant and machinery, or they put in some people into analysis and research. So how these costs are going to be dealt with from an income tax standpoint, that would need to be seen. Now, if they are utilizing their CSR funds for this particular aspect, whether those CSR funds will be then tax deductible or not. So all those aspects need to be seen, right? How these funds are being flown into the system for reducing the carbon emissions.
So basically, what you're saying is that still there is a lot of ground in terms of the policy to be covered,
Correct.
To incentivize industries to walk the ESG path. अभी तक ठीक है, मतलब रिपोर्टिंग हो गई, प्लस और माइनस निकल आए, but what next, right? And whether those costs will be deductible, not deductible, whether those credits will come, not, the tax around it, of course the indirect side, not the direct side, right? Interesting point. Yeah. So any idea how other countries are dealing with these indirect levies, so to say, not the direct part? Probably other countries too would have that capital gain element available in their acts, but about the indirect side, because what I read through was that, like for example, Canada is already levying it. I think Sweden is already levying it. France too has some levy on that.
Japan, South Africa, UK, Canada, they are all, and most importantly, EU. EU is at the forefront of these carbon taxes and pushing forward towards, and rather than putting more of taxes, they are saying that we will not even allow purchases of goods from countries where or the entities where these carbon emissions rules and regulations are not being followed. And if you would have read some news, India is pushing hard for EU to not implement these kind of regulations at a fast pace, because many Indian companies will not be able to, comply with those regulations.
Right.
So that will shut off the European markets for the Indian companies. That may happen. So it's not just about the tax; it's about the other measures also which are being followed. Say, for example, Sweden has taxes on CO2 emissions. Similarly, South Africa has implemented certain taxes. Japan also levies tax on fossil fuels. In India also we have some carbon cess, coal cess, which is very nominal, but yes, it's there to some extent. So the carbon tax may not only be on income, right? It may not come through Income Tax Act itself. Or the income tax code. There can be direct taxation on the emissions. That they will set a standard that, okay, this kind of industry should emit this kind of carbons only into the environment, and if you are emitting more carbons, you'll have to pay certain tax.
Something like a levy, something like a cess levy, which is probably there in other forms as well. So that's what I was saying. The indirect side would be probably the cess side, depending upon which industry turns out to be the culprit. Probably once the second report of March of 25 lands up into SEBI's mailbox, so we will have probably a change scenario, but an interesting, good conversation that we had. So and we have a few questions lined up. So one last question from my side is, just a second, I forgot. How I would use the word tomorrow, when probably the cess side is always there and the direct levy is also there, and all the other countries are probably having some barriers in terms of the tax. Then do you think there would be, apart from this multilateral treaty, some more mitigating tax elements involved, apart from just giving a one or two credit intercompany or something like that, probably inter-industry?
Probably the multilateral treaty, this treaty which This will also try to streamline the taxes which are levied by each of the country. That will kind of streamline that how these taxes should be levied. Say, for example, in if I can just give a corollary from an income tax standpoint, that all the countries, major countries, have agreed that there should be a minimum tax of 15% in
Hmm.
all jurisdictions, right? And if this particular regulation is not complied with, we'll consider that country to be a tax haven, and there will be some,
Okay.
some kind
Yeah.
of negative aura which will be developed around that those particular jurisdictions. So similar way, probably this kind of treaty will push the countries to either levy certain kind of taxes on carbon emissions, or give certain kind of emissions which are at a parity,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
brings some parity across the
Good
world,
point. Yeah. Good point. Good point. Yes.
right?
You're.
So
Yeah.
probably that is where this multilateral treaty will come into picture. Otherwise, अभी आज की डेट में भी हर कोई अपनी तरफ से तो कर ही रहा है ना कुछ ना कुछ.
Correct. Correct. Correct.
So in
To
some
bring semblance and to bring, a single umbrella in terms of the levy and the mechanism and the process, you're right. Something like that would have to emerge. Good, 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 good. So we had a good, interesting conversation around the entire gamut of carbon tax. We have a few questions lined up. So I'll hand over to Mukesh to, take it on from here.
Hi.
Mukesh.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, guys. Sorry for being
Hi, Mukesh, how are
late
you?
and technology. I got stuck on the road and the internet got better of me while teaching here. So that's so happened. I'm not sure whether people have really got to know much about Anshul at the beginning of the session, but I think let me take this opportunity to also talk about what Anshul has really been doing. What astonishes me most about Anshul is the rare combination of a CA who understands technology. I mean, someone who really works with technology a lot. He's using technology in many ways, multiple initiatives. He's actually a startup founder also himself. So, which is again one big facet that we probably could talk about through Startup Bazaar and other initiatives that he's taken. More than 2 decades now in CA practice that he's been really working with, a specialist in cross-border trade, transfer pricing, taxation, and a lot of financial and accounting consulting and advisory that he does to multinational organizations. So thank you, Anshul. So thank you very much for giving us this time and the insights today. Taking this forward, and guys, we're really sorry for the technical glitches that may have happened. I think it's about time we retire this platform and probably move to next one. Another one is looking like it at the moment. So some questions, there have been a couple of questions here. So it says, will carbon tax benefits act like a dollar arbitrage in overseas business? I mean, I know a lot of IT companies also play on dollar value and dollar arbitrage. That's what happens. So so as I understand correctly, it looks like, Manu, that if I really follow the carbon tax or a carbon tax regime and do carbon neutrality better than the others, do I really get additional benefits in terms of my trade, like we normally have it in dollar value, which is going up and down? Does it really help?
I don't think that this is something which is similar to currency trade. Because the
Okay.
carbon offsets are something which is driven by the carbon emissions.
All right.
And
Okay.
right, and it's not a currency that okay, dollar will have certain value against rupee, it will have certain value against Japanese yen, and because there will be some difference between Japanese yen and Indian rupee also, they can do some arbitrage and trade in those.
Right.
So carbon credit is once for all. Means basically, if you are reducing the carbon emissions as per the standards prescribed,
Right.
then according to those reduced carbon emissions, they will give you certain credits at your at your
Okay.
credit.
Okay.
Now, when you have this carbon credit, you can sell it once only.
All right. Okay.
Once you have sold it on the platform, it's gone.
So it's not retradable, is what you say.
No, it's not retradable. Now, what can be done is probably the company which is purchasing. Most of the times, what we have seen that the only company which will be purchasing is only the company which is obligated to purchase those carbon credits.
Okay.
So we have not seen, in my experience, means probably somebody might have other experiences, but in my experience, I have not seen companies just doing trading in the carbon credits and then purchasing and selling. Somebody may do, means some authorities may do, But on a wider scale, I've not seen companies engaging in this business itself.
All right. So you can't simply buy surplus and keep it to yourself and simply say, okay, tomorrow I'm allowed to generate more carbon in its own way. It just doesn't work like that.
आप अपने पास तो रख ही सकते हो, because see, if you are into business, when you are emitting more carbons, probably you will, if you are foreseeing that my obligations will be there, so probably you can purchase it prior to when the prices are low, because this is a fluctuating market.
Okay. All right.
It's on the demand and supply basis also. It's not a fixed price that one carbon credit will sell for this particular rupee only. In Indian scenario, also the renewable energy certificate, there is a floor price, but ultimately it depends upon the demand and supply kind of thing. So in 2018-19, the price was much higher. Then it dropped somehow. It went. There was a time when renewable energy, there was no buyer of renewable energy certificates in India.
Oh, okay.
हाँ, तो मतलब ऐसा भी आया बीच में टाइम, तो अभी फिर दोबारा से कुछ चल रहा है. There can be regulatory issues also. So, but I have not seen, because this is a highly regulated market. I don't foresee too many companies indulging in trading of carbon credits just to win the arbitrage.
All right. Perfect. Great. And so now the next question is Ramit is asking. So what are the industries which will benefit the most from carbon tax? I mean, is there any industry which will specifically gain more traction than the others?
Industries, the renewable energy sector, basically the solar power, the wind power, the biomass, biofuels, and all those companies which are implementing new technologies which bring down the carbon emissions. All those industries, all those companies will be benefited out of this, because see, ultimately there is a cost to implement these technologies also. Right. So if you are going towards renewable energy sources of energy generation, then obviously these sources are costlier. And putting up a solar plant is much more expensive than putting up a coal-based electricity generation plant, right? So that is where, because there are huge initial costs in setting up wind power plants, wind parks, or to say that transport the biofuels, or to extract energy from biofuels. So that's why the government is also incentivizing, because these kind of technologies do need higher initial investments, and that is where these offset mechanisms have been brought in. That companies who are still using the older technologies, they need to actually incentivize and to compensate these companies who are putting up more costs, so that their costs can come down. So this is why the carbon credits mechanism has been brought in place, first of all.
All right. Interesting. Any words before we call it a day today? Anything specific that you want people to consider or remember whenever they talk to building carbon tax?
I think carbon tax is one aspect of ESG. It's one smaller part, but on a wider scale, the ESG reporting is actually an upcoming area wherein we as professionals need to put our minds around, and we need to put our thoughts around. We need to develop our practices around these reporting requirements, because not too many people are working around it. Right. And Rajiv ji and you being there means, you are, pushing forward this cause. And I think that is where probably there will be a lot more traction and a lot more push from the government side, from the regulatory body side, to go for these kind of reportings, and also to implement carbon reductions in their own processes. So it is very important to be aware about these kind of changes which are happening around in the regulatory framework, and to take action also, not just be aware about it, take action also, and to implement those kind of things, so that you are not caught unaware. And because ultimately, if you are going to do it at the very fag end, the costs are going to be much more higher.
Absolutely. So this is, in fact, adding on to what you said, that is what we keep advising people also as well, that today it may seem like it's a long shot or long way to go, probably another couple of years. But like we've seen it with a lot of technologies and a lot of frameworks in the past also as well, people are caught napping at the last moment, and all of a sudden they want to do retrospective work, and which actually takes away at least a couple of years from their growth cycle and all this stuff that happens. So
I was doing some course from on a strategy oriented course. It was one of the major points which we were told that when you are making strategy, you're not making strategy for tomorrow. You are making strategy for 10 years down the line.
Sure.
You have to think ahead. So
True.
if you are not thinking ahead, you will end up like Kodak, or you will end up like Nokia.
True. Perfect.
That
So on
is-
that note, thank you very much. Thanks a lot, Anshul. Rajeshwar, if you'd like to.
Anshul, thank you.
Thank you.
Your parting note is absolutely right. We are not going to become a Nokia or a
Yeah.
BlackBerry. So we will remain the Apple of the year ahead.
Yes.
Who is apple of the eye? So, all right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
My pleasure. Thank you everyone for taking out time. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.